from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast, Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
All right, folks, welcome to Veteran November here on the CyberHub podcast, Tech Corner. I hope you like our new intro. Joe, you broke in our brand new intro for Tech Corner. So much better than our old techno music, I think.
They're rocking.
It is rocking. And I like the guitar, right? Like, I just love like a good guitar solo. And so that was brilliant. A great guy, one of my voiceover guys, his name is Keith, just incredible talent, did this. And he's brilliant. Folks, Veteran November, myself, Joe here, two guys wanting to have a conversation. Before we get started, though, folks, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe now to our podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe bell and make sure you watch us all the way through the end. I always have some really cool stuff here at the end. And without further ado, Joe, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good. I've been off for the last week or so and been loving it. So this is the last big thing I'm doing before I go back to work. So
you took a little vacation. Did you go out anywhere? Did you do anything, or was it predominantly COVID lockdown? It
was very carefully going to the grocery store, very carefully going to eat out at one of our favorite Mexican restaurants, and just being very avoiding large crowds. So yeah, pretty much a COVID type of vacation, and mostly staying at home, binging on Netflix, playing a few video games, and just having life.
It's funny when people always talk about vacation. They go, well, are you going somewhere? Are you going to go stay in a hotel somewhere? And I always feel more tired when I travel on vacation than when I do when I stay home.
Yes, I think it's because, you're like out and you're like, oh, I can do all these things. And then by the time you come home, you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. What did I do? I got to go to work on Monday.
Some people need a vacation from their vacation.
Yes.
Brilliant. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about your service. Where'd you serve? How long you were in for? What branch of the service you were in?
Sure. Well, I was in the United States Army. I enlisted right out of high school, and I enlisted in 1999, May 1999. So I served from then until 2015. So almost 20 years, but it's people ask me, well, why didn't you do the rest of it? I said, I got tired. I had been
deployed. You had what, 6-7 more years for retirement?
Yeah, but basically the time that I left the military, the Army was kicking people out, and it was just about that time, and I said, you know what, that's fine. It's time to do something else. But in retrospect, as much as I would have loved to stay in and get that 6-7 years more to retirement, I'm glad I did, because I think the timing was just right. I'd like to, I am a Christian. I believe in God and a higher power. And I believe that maybe that was just the ordained time for me to go, because it seemed like at the time, 2015, you had a lot more understanding and realization that, oh crap, this cybersecurity business is real serious stuff. Because if you think about I think that was about the time APT-1 was discovered, maybe, or one of those APTs. There was a lot more APT nation-state activity coming onto the scene. You had the emergence of lots of major malware families at the time, whether it be info stealers, whether it be major Trojans that we've all seen out there, like not ICE-ID. Oh, there's so many of them I can't keep track. But anywho, that was probably an ordained time for me to be out and about.
No, you make a ton of sense. I mean, timing is everything, and I think a lot of times, I've had a veteran on before who was a reservist his entire career. Mm-hmm. Does that make him less of a serviceman?
No, 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 no.
You know, I mean,
Reservists do a very good job of they do a very good job straddling that fence. I guess you could say, well, let me amend that because I don't want people to say, oh, straddling the fence. So I just say I'm gonna have no. Well, there's always that. Let me not dig myself further into.
no, it's all right. I get
Probably
what you're
should
trying to
edit
say.
that
No,
out.
you're trying to say the right thing, right? Which is,
Right.
if it wasn't for reservists, active duty people wouldn't have as easy of a time. Reservists do a lot of the stuff that supports
Yes.
active duty military, and
Yes,
there's an
they do.
aspect to that that can't be taken for granted, right? And I think
Correct.
service is service. I think if more people in our country did service, we would have more community and more gratitude and more appreciation one to another.
I totally agree with that.
Than we do with that. I mean, you definitely said a lot of very, very positive things there. I don't think anyone took you out of context, and if you did, up yours. I'm kidding.
No, I just have to be. You just have to always be careful when you're doing things in public or saying things, not even just on public, but in podcast, not just in podcast, but in public. We have a right to free speech, but also people have a right to react to you. So I don't want to be, I don't want to mess with anybody or offend anybody. I try to speak my mind, but speak it in a respectful way that, everybody, that people can understand.
I think discourse is the basic right of Americans. Having conversations is the basic right of Americans, but we don't want to go down that route. Let me ask you this: did you study InfoSec? Were you in an InfoSec unit when you were in the military, or did you do it after you transitioned?
Well, I think before I went on my tangent, I should have probably explained my military career a little bit better. So I enlisted as a 98 kilo, which is a non-Morse signal interceptor analyst, which is basically somebody who can snoop into into calls, radio signals, and things like that. I was in military intelligence, so my first unit was at Fort Meade. So my first enlisted unit was at Fort Meade, and then from there, I had got this crazy bug in my ear to go try to be a military academy graduate. So I actually did that. I applied for the military academy and I got in. I went to the prep school, which was then at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, if you've ever heard of that old school place. So fast forward to the next year, so that's 2001 or 2001. Then I went to the academy. I'm United States Military Academy class of 2005. We just had our 15-year class anniversary, and it's been in there. I would say between that and then also branching military intelligence as an officer in the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault. Did 2 tours, one in Afghanistan and one in Iraq. Then I went to South Korea, which was awesome. Then I was an executive officer for a military entrance processing station, and then I left. And my first gig was outside of the civilian sector was with a major financial institution, and then my next gig took me here to where I live at in Texas. And I worked for a major consumer packaged goods company. And then I got this opportunity to be a cyber threat intelligence manager for Trinity Health, which is based out of Livonia, Michigan. And I've been building this program out from scratch for the last 2 years.
Wow. So you've traveled the world.
Yeah.
South Korea is an amazing place.
I love it.
The South, for those who don't, like, whenever I travel to Asia, I live in Atlanta. And so if I need to travel to Asia, I typically fly Korean Air to Seoul, and then from Seoul I'll go to, Tokyo or Singapore or wherever else I need to go. So the airport in South Korea is just wow.
Yeah, Incheon is like, oh my God, did I land in the Jetsons age? This is me and my wife, when we went to Korea, we first got there, we're like, whoa, because it's like space age cool. Like
you're like, this isn't Newark.
No, it's definitely not Newark, and it sure as heck ain't JFK, because woo.
Yeah, it's always like it's always an underrated airport, and I don't understand why. Like from a global ranking, and
Hmm.
we can have that debate offline. But it is an absolutely beautiful airport. So tell me a little bit about your transition from military to civilian. What was that like? What were some of your challenges as you were transitioning out and getting your first corporate job? And what are some of the
Hmm.
things that you wish you could tell yourself before you transitioned?
I think the best thing that I did was probably set up start getting help earlier than the year. With transition, you're supposed to start out a year before you actually separate. I think mentally I had started making that transition maybe 3 years, because you got to think, okay, my friend is going through this right now, which is good. But I didn't really get started until maybe 3 years prior to say, okay, do I want to do this forever? And if I'm going to get out, what do I want to do? So I start looking at the infosec field, and I said, you know what? This lines up with my, I'll use the good old OPM term, Office of Personnel Management, knowledge, skills, and abilities. I have the knowledge as a intelligence professional, or as an intelligence professional who did a lot of IT type work, cybersecurity work that goes back all the way from elementary school all the way to the present. Being that one person that everybody says, "Hey, can you fix this computer?" That was me, and I had it as an additional duty. I studied it. I have an interest in it. I've programmed. I have my minor in computer science and a master's in computer science as well, or not computer science, information technology, specializing in information assurance and security. So I was like, well, obviously, InfoSec is for me. And I started doing a lot of research on the field and seeing if there was anything comparable to what I was doing in the intelligence field and in the management field. And at the time, 3 years, uh, so 3 years from 2015, you know, 5 - 3 is 2, 2012. I had to do my math on my fingers. That's how smart I am.
I
Yeah,
have to count like this too, man. It's all right.
yeah. So I'm like, if I run out of toes, that's it, man. It's just like too much for me.
Well,
But
well, you know what they say. If you like do 7 - 9 and you get to zeros, it's not doable. It's a failing formula.
yeah, and that's another story for another time. How I really stink at math, but for whatever reason, probability, statistics, and cryptography makes perfect sense. I don't know, my brain is just like wired differently. But I think back to the original point, because I tend to trail off like Grandpa Simpson. So
I feel like I'm in the Kanye West Joe Rogan conversation I was listening to over the weekend.
no, dragon energy, or whatever he says. I don't know. Poor Kanye. But anywho,
I
but
don't know if he was so poor. You should watch his interview with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan actually made Kanye West look human.
wow, that's impressive. That is
Shout out to
impressive.
Joe for that.
Yes, indeed. But as far as transitioning, I would say one of the main things for me was planning early, like taking stock of my skills and what my abilities were and where I needed to grow. Kind of just doing a gap analysis, strengths, weaknesses, or a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and so on. So doing kind of a self-owned SWOT analysis, and then I would say the other thing would be building up my LinkedIn profile on corporate social media, not Twitter, not Facebook, but LinkedIn. And I got to say, one of the big things about LinkedIn is, you know, keep it professional. You can support Joe Biden, you can support Donald Trump, you can support
Kanye
um,
West first running for president.
Kanye West for his run for president, or you can argue the merits of cats versus dogs or whatever it be. But stick to try to stick to business as much as you can. Facebook and LinkedIn are not the same, so keep it professional. Yes, have those conversations about social things that are going on in politics to a certain degree, because one thing that I find a lot of that really trips people up sometimes is this: keep politics out of LinkedIn, or keep politics and social things out of LinkedIn. Well, you can't really do that to a certain extent. if that makes any sense. But you can do it in a way that's still professional and still maintains the candor that is in that type of a professional environment. So shout outs for civility and professionalism.
I think LinkedIn for the last 3 months has been the only safe social network I can be on.
Yes, I would agree with that.
I go to Twitter, I sink in a dark hole. Like, I literally feel like Twitter is the abyss of humanity. Like when God brought the flood to Noah, that was. Can you imagine if there was Twitter then?
Oh Lord!
God decided to kill all of humanity and spare Noah and his family and 2 of every animal.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have Twitter back then. I don't think they even had newspapers.
No, I don't think so. I think they just probably made some marks.
I mean,
on the
if
wall.
God didn't make that promise to Noah, we'd be flooded today. Thanks to Twitter, nothing else. Thanks to Twitter.
Yes,
Jack Dorsey would have brought the doom upon all of us.
Yes, I blame social media in general for being a flood of interesting and disinformation. But again, I did the Grandpa Simpson thing. I'm sorry, I go off on tangents a lot. But
so let me ask you this though, real quick. Let me give you something to write. So when you were building your professional LinkedIn profile, as you were transitioning out, and you were looking to go into, and you got your first corporate job, what was the transition like into your first corporate job?
I would say that it was It was a mix of exciting, nervousness, because I hadn't held a job outside of the military in almost 15, 16 years. And it's like, oh my God, do I know what to do? I just knew to wear a suit, a tie, and do everything that the transition folks told us to do. And most of all, I have a very supportive spouse that was like, you got this, you can do this. I've been, of course, working outside the home, and I've been in civilian life more than you. So that's another pro tip. If you have a spouse and she or he works outside of the home and is in that civilian, whether it be government employee service or private sector service, listen to what your spouse has to say, because you don't know everything. So big point there, pro tip.
No, you don't.
So as far as showing up that first day, it was a bit nerve-wracking, but eventually you settle in and you understand, and I think the big stumbling block for me was, sir, ma'am, like, dude, no, you're not in the service anymore. I'm Matt, I'm Bob, I'm Gerald, whatever your name is, not sir, ma'am. Like, sir is for, I got told one time that I should be calling you sir, since you were in the military and you went and did all those things. I should be calling you sir. I'm like, no, that's not necessary, but thank you.
Did you have any challenge in terms of beyond the lack of formality? Was there anything else that kind of took you a little bit more time to adjust beyond the sir and the ma'am?
To be honest, it was interesting having to. It sounds stereotypical, and it kind of is, but it was I won't even call it a challenge, but not having to wear your uniform is like kind of like, oh man, I got to decide on what to wear, and it's really honestly, that was one of my
that was the
cliche.
That's the cliche, right? That's why I always wear black t-shirts, because that's my uniform in civilian life. I wear black t-shirts. I have literally the most boring closet on the planet.
Yeah.
It's all black t-shirts. On weekends, I wear grunt-style black t-shirts. Mm-hmm. I only order grunt-style black t-shirts. If they don't make that model in black, I don't order it. My wife has brought me several gray and blue shirts to wear, and I wear those every once in a while. I've got a few button-up shirts and some sweaters, and even my sweaters are black.
I tend to stick to gray and black myself sometimes.
But you're wearing blue today.
Today, yes, I have blue on because eventually my repertoire expanded to pink/salmon, whatever you want to call it, and khakis, and even yellow at sometimes, dark yellow, checkers. So I think the other thing is, your you gotta. That's another transition point. As tacky and cliche as it sounds, start reviewing your style, of how you dress, because there is no uniform per se in the civilian sector, but start developing that sense of style. Because I've seen some people get out of the military, and it's like you need the Fab Five stat. You need you need those guys like quick, fast, in a hurry, because it's how you dress is what says something about yourself. How you take care of yourself and groom yourself says something about yourself as well. And being
Are you trying
military,
to tell me something about my beard?
it's not within the AR. No, I'm just kidding.
I was 35 Lima. I could have a beard.
Hey, more power to you, man. More power. I
I
can
had
grow 'em.
exemptions.
Hey, that's freaking awesome. I wish I had this exemption, but no. On the serious tip, people will grow out. I had young soldiers like, oh yeah, I'm gonna grow his beard out and I'm trimming it, and I see him in their pictures later. I'm like, dude, you need to shape that up. Don't just go out there looking crazy.
Well, go to the barber every few weeks. Have
Mm-hmm.
him line you up right on your beard,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then just trim it in the 2 weeks leading up to it. Make sure it doesn't get too long.
Right.
And then 2 weeks later, you get your hair cut again. You get your beard done again.
But if you want to rock those pork chop sideburns, like those old Civil War pictures, go for it.
Dude, those sideburns are awesome. Don't you dismiss those sideburns. Those sideburns are brilliant. Let me ask you this, though. What are you doing today? So you're leading a cyber threat intel team. What does that mean for someone that wants to get into cyber threat intel? How did you get into it? Did you do any certs? Anything like that?
Well, number one, as far as getting into the whole thing, as far as certs and qualifications, cyber intelligence at that time, cyber threat intelligence as it's commonly known, I tend to omit the threat, and I have a whole presentation. I did a whole presentation at that for a conference about why you need to just call it cyber intelligence. But again, I digress. But in cyber intelligence, a relatively new discipline on both, I would say, the military side and as far as the civilian sector side. I got into it just as a matter of I was looking for something direct to something I like. I really like intelligence analysis. I like doing that type of work. That's why I didn't just stick with it for being enlisted, but I did it as an officer as well. So I found this role just by happenstance, and I applied for it. The guy who interviewed me and his boss and his boss's boss happened to like me, and so they brought me on. Now, as far as like certs and things like that, there were no certs at the time when I first got into this field. It was based on your ability to do analysis. That analysis part is key. Having the technical expertise and just being able to clearly, coherently present. You have your PowerPoint Ranger tab, and be an Excel guru, and you were golden. I think the most critical thing that brought me in was my ability to think and my ability to write. And having those things and being able to articulate it to non-technical folks, especially, it was a key to my success initially.
I love that, and thank you for sharing that. I think most veterans, when they think of cyber, because cyber has an appeal for people that come from the military. It's defense and offense. It's got the adrenaline rush. It has the opponent versus good guy versus bad guy almost feel to it. Mm-hmm. And so it's very, very appealing for people who come from the military to want to go into InfoSec. And I feel like veterans have a ton more. And honestly, my gut feeling says that in 10 years, I think 40% of our military is going to be cyber.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, at the time that I got in, this is
cyber wasn't a thing. I mean, I enlisted in 2001. Cyber
mm-hmm.
was not a thing. There was Signal, and mm-hmm. Signal was about Signal was about cyber as you can get.
Yep.
and so there is an aspect to that I agree with. Let me ask you this though. Interviewing for your role as you were coming in a civilian, what tips would you give people?
Well, number one, make sure you wear your entire suit and make sure that you have pants. Like today, I have pants on. You know, you can't see it, but I have pants on. You know, make sure you wear the whole thing, and you don't do, because a lot of the interviews these days are by video. So make sure not only are you groomed, but make sure that you wear the whole suit. Because I did have one interview where they asked me to stand up because they wanted to make sure that I was wearing pants.
Did you do it? Did you comply?
I did, because I was like, I ain't got nothing to hide, and I did have pants on, so that was a good thing.
That's a weird question. Like, stand up.
Yeah, that was very strange. I didn't get
You're
the
like,
job.
have you guys interviewed like, is this a Jeffrey Toobin thing? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
what is
like,
this?
It's like, okay, well, sure. But I didn't get that job, and that was probably a good thing, because that was a really weird interview. So aside from dressing well, just number one most important thing, aside from wearing pants, is to not talk in military acronyms. Nobody knows outside of the military or government service knows what a 98K or 35 Lima is, and then people look at you like, like, I don't know what this person is talking about.
Let me Google this.
Yes, let me Google this. If they have to Google what you do and you can't explain it in a way that translates to normal everyday folks, then you are a no-go at that station. I'll bring back one of my favorite euphemisms. The other thing I would also suggest that folks do is be able to not so much be able to quantify when necessary, but also be able to tell your story. Your story is more relatable than you think. Don't just be like, I was a sergeant first class and I was, okay, that's cool, but what did you do while you were leading? Don't leave out the gory details of blowing things up, or you had some wall-to-wall counseling with a soldier one time, but just stick to, here's how I lead or how I do my work, and just spell it out very easily, in a digestible way that people can understand.
There we go. We got you.
Okay.
So, we're almost out of time, Joe, and I love having this conversation with you, but I promised people 30 minutes a day. We're at 28 minutes. And so let me ask you one final question. What's one thing you loved about your military service?
I truly loved the people that I worked with, especially the young soldiers, and being able to influence them. I have to say the most rewarding thing that I ever saw is as a cadet, first class cadet, so a senior. I had the opportunity to go to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and be a drill cadet as part of my cadet troop leadership requirement, basically my internship. And I talked to a lot of the soldiers coming up there, and for me it was rather funny, because I went back to the same basic training location that I went to as a young soldier at 18, and I didn't know what kind of influence that I had until I was in South Korea in 2011, and we're doing one of the exercises, and one of the lieutenants comes up to me and says, "Hey, I remember you. You're the reason why I became a lieutenant. I was at the same I was in the basic training unit. You were doing your cadet troop leadership." And he just told me about how I helped inspire him to go to ROTC and become a officer. And I was like, wow. That was just amazing.
The people. Joe, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate that. Folks, another one in the bag for Veteran November. Thanking our men and women of the service who served our nation, served to protect our freedoms, and honoring them all of the month of November. Make sure to subscribe to get more. We'll be back with more episodes tomorrow. Until then, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Stay healthy and stay cyber safe.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.